Hey guys, it is Clint. Welcome to Sweetcast. I'm going to do this video in absolutely one take because I have to. I got too much going on in a good way, but yeah, things are getting busy. So Ethan Van Sciver posted this on Twitter, and this did stimulate some thinking, stimulated my brain. He said the Cyberfrog Blood Honey team-up cover variant has sold 4,035 copies, and it's still climbing, approaching $202,000. Understand, this is the third variant of a single graphic novel sold at $25 price point. This variant alone outsold Batman and Star Wars in April. Amazing. So I go down here. This is a clip from I was going to say Comic-Con, from Comic-Con, some sales numbers. We've got some Amazon listings here. And this is really interesting. Prices, units sold, and he's right. It's right up there as far as graphic novels go. And I've heard a lot of people complain about you can't compare it to single sold issues. You can't compare it for this reason or that reason. But actually these price points, like I'll even tell you for Downcast, my book, we're talking right in the same price point. In fact, MSRP is lower than what these are listed at. I realize that it is a probably smaller page count than most of these, but give me a break, man. I mean, I don't have a dedicated creative team that's doing this all full time. So that's indie comics for you. Having said that, it's still lower MSRP, still technically a graphic novel. And yeah, it's still outselling these guys. I'll tell you for mine, I was actually looking at the numbers earlier. It's still in demand. So here at the lowest here, Batman Detective Comics Volume 9, they sold $23.55. I've actually sold on Downcast. I just did the numbers today, and it's a little over 1,300. So we're not quite there yet. Still in demand, though. It's going. That is an impressive number, though. It's a lot of books, actually. And of course, some of those are going doubles for some customers. They're buying multiple copies. But if you're being honest, that's how people do comics in stores anyway. They're buying multiple copies a lot of the time, and comic publishers know this. And so they'll definitely go for that. So my question is, at what point will the established comic industry, that amorphous blob out there that we call the comic industry, it's the they that we always would blame or point fingers at, when will they recognize Comicsgate books as legitimate? This has been something I've been thinking about for quite a while. I've wondered myself, when will I be considered a legitimate creator in the eyes of the wider industry? It's weird because it does feel like there's a double standard. And a lot of that comes from news coverage. It seriously feels like there are two comic industries, and one has been forming around the movement that was Comicsgate, and it has morphed, and all sorts of different groups are plugging into it and using the network. And then there's the traditional industry, and that could be mainstream comics, but it could also be indie comics, traditional indie comics, and they're sort of doing their own thing. Now, I would love nothing more than all the customers to be buying my book. I'll be honest, all customers, that would be amazing. And I don't think it's really a customer problem. I think it has more to do with the establishment that exists right now. So the fact that Comic-Con has finally recognized sales from crowdfunding sites, it listed here in this other channels column $20 million in sales. That's pretty great. That $20 million comes from crowdfunding, and it also comes from, according to their numbers here, it comes from newsstand sales as well. And I'm guessing that crowdfunding has got to make up the biggest chunk of that $20 million. And that's just because you see so many campaigns out in general, so many campaigns, but so many campaigns that are also making a lot of money. So that's definitely a significant dent. This is a step toward legitimacy in the comic book industry. I always kind of come across this when I say you can break into comics by making your own book and crowdfunding it. Some people would say, well, that doesn't count as breaking in because you don't have a publisher. The publisher has to give you legitimacy. Now, I disagree with that. Whether somebody else, a third party is publishing your book or you're publishing your book, it's still being published and readers are still buying it, presumably. I will say, if you're paying to have a book published that literally nobody is reading and it's just sort of a vanity project, don't get me wrong, that's cool too. I'm all for that. But it makes sense why that's not like counted in sales or anything like that. But I think that's in the minority for sure. I digress. My point is that these kinds of comic book sales and indie comics should be considered legitimate, even though I feel like it's not. It's too frequently that it's just ignored. What do I mean by that? Well, if you look at books that have been, I think, undeniably successful in indie comics, we're talking Jawbreakers here. It's made over $400,000. I'd say well over $400,000. It has started a new series. There's going to be more coming out. Everybody knows in comics, people that work in the industry, I would be hard pressed to find somebody that doesn't know anything about Jawbreakers, not just because of the success of it, but also because of all of the drama and the lawsuit and all that kind of stuff. But Jawbreakers is something that's well known for sure. Now, Jawbreakers is a book that is officially published. It is out there. I know because I've got a copy sitting right here on my desk. It is out there. The second printing has already done a crowdfunding campaign, and that's should be fulfilled shortly. All these things have happened. It's been published. And if I do a Google search for Jawbreakers comic, I'll see the Indiegogo campaign first. I'll see a note from the Federalist comic outrage cycle. Again, it's about the controversy. This is not from Comics Press or traditional comics news. Bounding into Comics, that's no surprise that Bounding into Comics is a Comicsgate friendly site. I don't know a ton about their history, but I would guess that they sprung up about the time that Comicsgate did. I'd have to look into that though to make sure. I do know though they are friendly. They're an alternative comic book news site. We've got Reddit, Splatto Comics, which is that's your boy Zach's publishing company. The Daily Dot, this is about the cancellation, and that takes us, that's down to the fold. I didn't see any Bleeding Cool articles. There's a number of things I did not see. That is shocking. Now, when you do see a Bleeding Cool article, again, it has to do with controversy. It has to do with, it's a hit piece, let's be honest. But you're not seeing the regular coverage like you would for another indie comic, especially one that's been that successful. So I checked on Cyberfrog, hoping to find something. I did find a comic find, and I was like, kind of got excited. This is the old Cyberfrog. This has been here for a very long time. So don't get too excited. I didn't find anything for the current Cyberfrog, though I will admit it's not published yet. It is not out. So that makes sense. Regardless, though, there still hasn't been news coverage that is the same as though if it had been something else. Anything else that had been remotely just as successful. In Comics Press, you only have those alternative sites that are willing to give coverage. So Iron Sights, here's another one. This is another one by your boy Zach. Published. It's been out for months and months. I find the Indiegogo page. I find the medium.com. Bleeding Fool, not to be confused with Bleeding Cool. Not the same thing. Again, this is another alternative site. Splatto Comics. 4-Color Apocalypse. I'm going to have to look at some of these Bounding in the Comics. But what I'm not seeing are any of the major comic book news outlets that you would normally see things come from. Reflections from a Grown-Up Man. See, this is a blog. Oh, and that looks familiar. This is Ant. So this is negative, and it's his own thing. This is a blog, so none of this matters. But again, it's what you're not seeing, which is articles from Bleeding Cool, CBR, anything like that just talks about it objectively as a comic that has come out and been successful. It's not there. You could look at other things like Deadbeats. This is just one example of comics, and you'll get articles from Newsarama. Again, this book has not been published yet. Let me make sure this is the right. I think it is. Want to make sure this is the right one. Yeah, it is. Newsarama. This is Deadbeats, and so it has not been published yet, but there's still there's information out there. I looked at Comic Vine. This is misleading because it's different Deadbeats, not the same thing. mycomicshop.com, my comic shop, those are old ones. Okay, so you get the point. This is hard. This hard title because it's there are other titles that exist. Point is, would Newsarama do an article on Cyberfrog? Would it do an article on Iron Sights? Jawbreakers? No. What about Bleeding Cool? Who do they write articles about? The alternative sites that exist today, they're there as a counterbalance, and it's, Sweetcast is one of them. There are many others. But they will highlight these other, independent comics creators that have no legitimacy from mainstream comics. Now, I don't think I'm naive enough to believe that any of it would really matter. Like, let's say that Cyberfrog is just so good that it could be written by, if it was written by anybody else, it would be up for an Eisner nomination. Okay? Under any circumstance could you see Cyberfrog, written and drawn by Ethan Van Sciver, being up for an award that is recognized by any mainstream comics whatsoever? I don't think so. I don't think it matters how well any of this is written, how much money is made, how long a series continues. None of this matters. I would love to be proven wrong. I'd love to find out that the world is completely fair and that all this is, made up, but I'm just not seeing it. Someday, I do believe that there will have to be recognition from comics in a larger sense that all these comics that are made from conservative creators, moderate creators, anybody that disagrees or has a varying point of view from the mainstream will have to be recognized. And this is just part of the proof. That is the fact that Comicron is now counting crowdfunded comics. Now, this might be a little bit of a compromise because there's all sorts of books that are doing crowdfunding. I will say, though, that like you go to Indiegogo, look at the top page, and at least 5 of the 6 projects that you see on the front page are all going to be related to Comicsgate in, either full-throatedly or in any kind of manner. So, I don't know, just food for thought. I am curious when mainstream comics will accept all the creators as comics creators legitimately. I'm not going to hold my breath, but I'd love to know what you think. Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to check out Downcast. We're gonna hit 28,000. That'll be great. If you haven't backed it yet, check it out, and please do back it. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you next time.